So I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Vaki Mawema. Vaki is not only an architect and a musician and a creative thinker and a game changer, he's actually also a colleague of mine and a friend. What I love in Vaki's spirit is that he's never one to take small baby steps. He's always really, the guy who takes great strides, knowing you need to, in order to get here, sometimes you got to take even further out, because often sometimes push you back. And so he's going to share a little bit about his opinion and point of view on that, and then we'll bring him back out to answer some questions. So please join me in welcoming Vaki Mawema.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Deanna has been very kind to me over the years. I love her tremendously. We met a few years back and she took me under her wing, and she's been a great mentor, as it were, and friend. So she takes tremendous risks herself, one of which is inviting me to speak to you today. So I hope this works out for you, Deanna. Good luck. It's funny, I don't think of myself as a risk taker at all. In fact, I never think of myself that way. I just, like most of you all, I'm sure, just show up to work and do what you do. But when I look back on my life, it seems to me that risk-taking has been around, has walked by me my whole life. In fact, risk-taking has been with me even before I was alive. My father was a politician. He was a politician at a time when being a politician and being black was a very dangerous thing. In fact, it could get you arrested. It could have gotten you tortured, incarcerated. In fact, it could have even gotten you killed. He was the first president of the first black political party in what was then called Rhodesia, a small country in southern Africa on the northern border of South Africa. And his claim to fame, one of his claims to fame, which actually got him exiled, was a declaration that he made, and he said that at the time, whenever the time should come that Rhodesia should become independent, its name shall be changed to Zimbabwe. He didn't stick around very long after that, because he was a wanted man, and so he ended up in the United States, and that's him right there on the far right. Here in the United States, lobbying or campaigning or trying to convince somebody of something. Well, independence did in fact come, and in 1980 that was, in Zimbabwe. And we moved back to Zimbabwe, and my parents, being the risk takers that they were, put me into a school where the apartheid legacy was very, very strong. Even after independence, that legacy stuck with the school. In fact, it was so strong that we, as black school children, weren't allowed to speak Shona or Ndebele, the two major native languages in Zimbabwe, while at school. You could only speak English or Afrikaans, both of which were foreign languages, ironically. But it was one of the better schools, and they took the risk. They knew that I might be subject to harassment myself, but they thought that with the times changing, and whatever their thoughts were, I don't want to speak for them, they took that risk anyhow. And at age 17 or so, I think perhaps mostly out of rebellion, I moved away from Zimbabwe, and I landed in San Diego, California. And I had no plans. I knew nobody. Only that I had received an acceptance letter from the New School of Architecture and Design in their architecture program. And so I moved. And it was there that I met the man that would become my professional mentor, my inspiration, and one of my dearest friends, Graham Downs. Graham Downs, like me, had left Africa to come to San Diego, and he had left actually to escape apartheid in his native South Africa in the mid-'80s. And I came to learn after the fact that, in fact, he had started his company, his firm, that I now worked for, on a credit card in a recession with only one client. And he took a tremendous risk. He worked extremely hard. The rest is history, but I can tell you this much. Graham's legacy that he has left of design in California and in San Diego in particular is one of the most celebrated ever. It was about this time, in fact, during that time when I worked for him, I watched Graham. He was tremendous because he took risks every single day, right? He pushed the design team, he stretched us. And his force of personality and energy was so undeniable. You couldn't help but go where he took you. And he was extraordinarily articulate. And he could just move people from here to there with the clarity of his words and with the crispness of his vision as an architect. And I loved working for him. And it was about this time that I read a book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, Brazilian writer. It was very profound. In the book, he talks about a young shepherd boy who, living in the hills or the wilderness of Andalusia, dreams of treasure hidden in the mountains, in the pyramids of Egypt. And it's his life goal. He makes it his life goal to go there. And he embarks on this unlikely journey. And throughout the whole period, he's facing challenges and tests. But most of all, he's being encouraged along the way to get there through all his trials. And he finally gets there, but there's no treasure. And he looks back on his life and realizes that the real treasure has been the journey itself. The people he's met, the risks he's taken and overcome, the love he's found. And working for Graham and reading this book altered my trajectory. I was at a great place in my life. I was newly engaged, very happy. Graham had made it clear to me that he wanted me to become a partner in his firm. But my fiance and I decided that something wasn't there, something wasn't right. We needed to go out and try something ourselves and take a risk. Just be like the guy in The Alchemist. Do that. And so off we went, and that is how I landed in Washington, D.C., which is where I live now. And I can tell you my first impressions of Washington, D.C., we drove to the mall. I'd never been there. And at that point, I'd been in this country perhaps almost 9 years. I was born in New York, but you can't tell. It's true, though. I just grew up in Zimbabwe. And I was moved to tears at the feeling of being proud to be an American. I'd never had that feeling. But being on the National Mall moved me so much, it was like my eyes were opened for the first time. Good afternoon to you all. My name is Vaki Mawema. I am the director of a design studio of our Gensler office in Washington, D.C. Gensler is a global architecture and design firm. The team that I work with in my studio focuses on mixed-use design, retail, hospitality, entertainment, and sports. So we're very, very focused on the impact of design in the public realm, and we talk about it a lot. Since I've been in D.C., a lot of things have changed. I had a family. I got 2 kids. I'm married. Oh, and let's not forget this. You guys remember this, right? The financial crisis? That happened too since I've been in DC. And I'll tell you about what that felt like for us in our industry. It was a time when we as designers and architects were taking very little risk. Okay, we had to really hunker down on our core business and try and save it from the deep, dark abyss that was the recession, and that had gobbled up so many firms, great firms. Some of them are competition, but nonetheless, it had taken its toll. Our clients were taking even less risk, right? And it was very difficult to be a designer for a client who's asking you to be as extremely conservative as you possibly can and preserve what they thought was the most essential part of their business. So they weren't interested in great big ideas or creative thoughts, unless, of course, those thoughts were about reducing their exposure to risk or saving them money. That also happened. We, as a country, while we in DC were doing our normal DC sort of conservative, hold our money, wait for the next election cycle, next financial real estate cycle to kick in, the rest of the country was out there taking a huge risk in electing that man, the President of the United States. A man who was untested at the time, politically speaking, inexperienced. Some were questioning even his Americanness. Some were questioning his birth certificate. Some were even questioning his blackness. Right? So the whole country was doing something that we weren't doing in DC, taking risks. They were asking him some really tough questions, but one thing is for sure. Obviously, he was successful and he was elected. And this man and his wife moved to DC, and everything started to change. Talk about coolness and bringing cool to DC, which is what I want to talk about. Barack Obama, through his own experience, his heritage, his life experience, his travels, his worldview, I believe, in no small part, is changing or has changed our own perception of our own identity of what it means to be an American. And I believe that he has, through that experience, captured the imagination of an entire generation. Those damn millennials. So between 2005 and 2009, when Barack Obama took office, the number of millennials that moved to DC grew by about 5%. From 2009 to 2014, that number swelled to 22%. With them came to DC new cool. With them came an explosion in industries like restaurants, retail, hospitality, mixed use, tech, startups, everything and anything you can think of except politics and government. All right? So DC was taking on this new dimension, this new character, and augmenting its old one. In fact, in 2014, DC was voted the coolest city in America by Forbes magazine. Might have been a bit of a stretch, but in DC, we were quite grateful for it. But look at what's being said about DC. Have a look, you know? In fact, I'll tell you what, just today, Norma, where's Norma? Put your hand up, please, Norma. There you are. She sent me an article today. Just today, Michelin awarded stars to 12, is it 12? 12 different restaurants in DC. That's never happened before, and it happened today. It is the restaurant city of the year. DC, right? I mean, it's amazing. And what's happening is DC as a city is taking on what I'm calling a millennial mindset. Things are changing, and they're changing for the better. If you haven't been to DC recently, I should get hired by the tourism board or something, but you should definitely go down and have a look. It's not the same DC of old. In fact, I think we are seeing ourselves differently. And design has a role to play in that, right? We are changing our perception, or hopefully we're trying to, from a company town, right, of the federal government to a real city that is really starting to touch and expose its authentic soul, the richness that's within that city. And we're very proud of it. But everywhere I go, New York, San Diego, wherever I go, I hear people talk about how sleepy, tired little DC is. It's boring. You guys have heard that, right? It's boring. It's not that cool. It's no New York. Is it true? Well, I know it's not New York, but is it boring? I don't know. Obviously, I don't believe that. I think DC is actually quite amazing. It's quite exciting. So what's the problem? I think the problem is a perception problem. And I'm asking a question to myself. What role then does design, architecture have in changing that perception? Right? And we've been talking a lot within my studio, my design studio, and we've come up with sort of 4 realms, as it were, that we think we can impact positively the perception that DC is a rich, exciting place. This notion of, as designers, we need to think about the design culture in which we work first, right? We need to get to understand our city. We need to understand our audience a little better. Who is our audience and what do they need? How do we touch them? And then we need to move our clients. So I'm going to talk about those, and I'm going to give a few examples here that I have been involved with personally and that I've seen where risk has been taken, risk has been perceived, right? And you compare the perceived risk against what I also perceive as the real risk. Let's start with this notion of culture. So I talked to you about my team back in DC. We call ourselves the Deuce. Don't ask how that name came to be. It is the name, just work with me. We call ourselves the Deuce. And we have a core belief that design is not about stuff. It's not about making that seat or a car or a building or a place or anything. It's about people. And what does that mean for us? That means we need to start changing about the way we think about how we actually have a process that gets us to the delivery of design. It means we've got to do a little better research in the communities that we're in. We need to know the history of these places. We need to get to understand what the motivations in these communities or these constituencies are. And then we need to come up and, we also need to understand the user experiences that are creating the memories that make communities actually communities. Things that people hold dear together. And then we need to create new processes for how those become design drivers, and then how we implement our design talent and skill into delivery. So we are working very hard and asking ourselves some very tough questions about that. And what's the risk? Well, the risk, the perceived risk at least, is that we start to look at design in a way that, one, probably wastes a lot of time, because you could just start drawing something and deliver it and get it done and make money and be out the door, right? Or two, was that applause? Oh, that was you. Two, people aren't used to this way of working, right? So my own team, I'm not used to it. We're all trying to find this out. In fact, today, a lot of people talked about a variety of things that are of a lot of interest to me regarding studying how communities evolve and what's important to them, getting to know the people, the constituents, and so forth. So we are learning as we're going. But we recognize that our design culture has to change. The second thing is about our city itself, our community. As designers, I think you need to get to know the communities in which you work. You have to understand that place. DC is amazing. I'm telling you this, probably some of you disagree, but it's because I've taken the time and I've gotten to know our city. And the story of DC is actually not monotony, and it is not sameness. The story of DC is variety and dynamism. And it is expressed through the neighborhoods of DC. You travel from northwest to northeast to southwest to southeast, and you will go through 10 or so different neighborhoods, all different, all with their own history and culture, all requiring different design responses, all requiring a different lens through which to understand those communities. And so we worked on this project that's on the screen right now, which is, it's called the Yards Park. In the middle of the recession, our client took a risk. And they bought up a piece of land on the Anacostia River. The Anacostia River, for those of you who know DC, has never had a reputation of being a beautiful thing. It's highly polluted. It was really in a bit of a shambles. And our client went in there and came to us and said, help us think about what to do here. How could we miss the opportunity to create a new neighborhood in DC? DC is only 69 square miles. I've just talked to you about the magic of DC being in its neighborhoods. How could we miss that opportunity? The risk, the real risk, is not the investment during a recession in a place that's ugly or whatever. The real risk is not taking advantage of this exquisite opportunity, right, on the waterfront, to create a place of retail, of mixed use, of housing, community, a real neighborhood. And if you've been down to the Yards, it has since become that and is a tremendous success. So we wonder how real the perceived risk was. We, in that community, in the Yards, we converted 2 buildings. This one here is the Boilermaker Building. And it looks like this now. Retail, office, mixed-use building. It's got a great bar in there, great distillery, a brewery in there. If you enjoy beer, it's called Blue Jacket. Go check it out. And we took this building and we made it into that. In fact, here's another shot of it right here. The developer, our client, is actually in that building. They moved. It's such a success. They moved from downtown DC to the Yards. And they are living proof of the success of their risk. Speaking of perceptions, I heard somebody talking about Starkitects earlier. Have you heard of this man? Has anybody seen this man before? Okay. A lot of people think that all architects are kind of like this, right? They're stars, they're black cape architects, and that's great. They do amazing work, and they're awesome. At Gensler, we have a little different philosophy. Whereas one man is one star, at Gensler, we look at ourselves as a constellation of stars. There's something that everybody on the team brings to the table. And it's that richness, it's that tapestry that we think adds to the design quality of what we deliver. So what we've done is we've taken it upon ourselves to represent what we say, what we talk about. And in our office in Washington, if you ever come to visit us, you'll see that we've done something that I don't know anybody else has done in downtown sort of Class A DC as far as architects go. We've taken our office and we brought it all the way down to the street right on K Street. You can walk right into the lobby. Why? Because we believe in our community. We believe that we are part of our community and our community is part of us. And us availing ourselves to our community adds yet another touch point to the community that we live in. We are extending those touch points that enhance the experience. So you can walk right into the door. You can look on the right. There's a cafe that you can enjoy a cup of coffee, just hang out and leave. Or you can come on upstairs and there's a vertical campus that animates your experience going up the building. And then you start to engage the design studios and you can see how open it is, right? Deanna, who I just mentioned earlier, and I were in we pitched a project a few years back for the Philadelphia Eagles, which was the renovation of their stadium. Now, you gotta understand, neither Deanna and I are really into football at all. In fact, we don't know very much about it at all. But we do know something about experience. And so we were out there competing against architects and designers who had done 1,000 stadiums. Stadiums upon stadiums, and they could tell you all the science there was between how to organize stadium seating in a bowl and get the sight lines going and all that. We didn't know any of that. But what we did say is we can talk to you about how you can forget about the game per se. You can deliver on that, that's easy to do. But you can't, one opportunity that you are missing is elevating the entire game day experience, reimagining that experience, so that it is something you can take away with you, you can go home with. That way, when you raise the price of your ticket, it's not just because you've got new seats to sit on, it's because you've got new offerings, right? You've got new touch points, you've got restaurants, you've got clubs, you've got bars, you've got a new, you name it, new entertainment, it's all in there. It is giving you a reason to enjoy the game experience without necessarily wanting to be all about the game. It's the experience, how we're impacting that public realm. And the last part of this is our clients. How are we moving our clients? I'm gonna give this example here, which is down in Crystal City, which is just outside of DC proper, but it's in the metropolitan area. If you've ever been to Crystal City, it's probably one of the least visually attractive places you can think of. It's tough. It's a tough place. And it's struggled over the years, right? For a number of reasons. But our clients have come to us and said, look, we need a little bit of help. We said, what's the problem? They said, well, we've lost about 3 million square feet of leased space. Our tenants have gone. And our buildings are sitting there empty. And so we said, okay, what do you think we should do? And they said, well, we were thinking maybe we can sort of look at that storefront and maybe touch them up, spruce them up or something. And we said, okay, what's that gonna do for you? And they said, that's gonna make it pretty, you know? And people will show up and hang out. And we said, yeah, but it's not gonna get anybody in the seats up there, is it? It's not gonna fill this, it's not gonna solve the problem. Because you're not looking at the problem holistically. What we need to be talking about is reimagining and creating a place, a real place, where the public realm and the experience that we're creating is elevated. So we started talking about things like placemaking, building communities. The conversation got a little broader. We got more experts in. Digital, creative, design, engineering. Everybody started talking, art. And now the conversation has shifted from a patch job to a reimagination. That's what you need to do. And the strategy is basically create a place where people want to be. All right? Think about the entirety of the experience. When you arrive there, where do you park? How do you get to the elevator? How do you get to the retail? How do you get to the street? Where do you eat? Then what? Then what? Then what? Then what? Then what? All of that. Then people want to be there. Then people want to live there. Then people want to work there. That's how you do it. And thank goodness we're now doing this. Right? We're starting to impact the entirety of that neighborhood. So I'm going to end by just saying this. We understand that change really involves, it's risky. I get it. But we heard somebody say today with the tightrope analogy, if you're on that tightrope and you've lost your, whatever you call that bar thing, and you've lost your umbrella, you got three choices. You keep going, you try to head back, or you go down. We're not interested in the latter two. We're trying our best to keep going. Because pushing forward is what gets you the change that keeps things advancing. And that change is risky. But doing nothing is even riskier. Because doing nothing is essentially the same thing as falling. Sooner or later, you're going to get outpaced by technology, you're going to get outpaced by design, by thought leadership, by something or the other will outpace you if you continue to do the same thing. Design doesn't work like that. We have to keep pushing the envelope. And that managing that risk involves managing people. So we are really taking a hard look at how we work with our clients, how we work with our teams, how we work with our consultants to get people on board and continue to reinforce the notions that are required to make those kinds of changes, so that the risk that people perceive as risk can be put into perspective. And hopefully we can get to a point where we understand that that risk is a necessary risk, right? And that through all of us getting together and making these changes happen, those risks diminish. And lastly, as designers, we're not designing stuff. We're not designing a storefront. That's not the end all and be all of design. Those things impact people. They impact communities. They impact whether or not we want to live somewhere, whether or not we want to go to that theme park, whether or not we want to visit that place. So think about community, because community is long and tendency is short. So that's all I have to say about that. But I do want to ask you to come and see us in DC. And I do want to ask that you watch how we're growing and how we're changing in DC, because DC doesn't need wholesale change to become cool. It is already cool. It just needs more people getting in the game and helping us change that perception. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Vaki. Okay, I'm going to now actually ask Sean and Vaki to come back out. We're going to give you guys a chance to ask either one of them some questions. So we'll pass around a microphone. Ask your questions.
Thank you. Hey, this is for Sean. So you say evolve or die, which I think is so pertinent to us, and a lot of people get gummed up in the process. And I think in the content creation world, something that I perceive as an evolution is with YouTube, content creation has become so democratized. I think MTV is doing an amazing job of kind of capitalizing on that, but how do you think the industry is going to take that and turn it into how they move forward instead of becoming dinosaurs behind YouTube?
Oh no, I think just the world of content overall, it's in a really interesting place. And like I always think that MTV is like stuck in the middle between, you know, Game of Thrones production value of $10 million and a YouTuber that does a video for $2, you know? And then people just doing content on Snapchat, which is, you know, very disposable. So where do we fit sometimes, you know? And I think there is an issue, I mean, not an issue, but in terms of the industry and how it evolves and how it monetizes. So until some of that monetization is not figured out, I mean, I don't think that my personal opinion is that when it comes to the future of content, especially on the more traditional networks, monetization is the one thing that they need to figure out first. And then content will sort of follow. People will continue to produce, but there needs to be, we need to understand how to monetize that better. When ad sales, so when all those ads disappear, you know, how do you feed that? So you can't spend all that money on that content if money's not coming in from your advertisers. So I think it's everyone's asking themselves sort of those questions, but I don't really have a clear answer.
Another question? Okay,
Microphone.
great.
Okay. So I really loved both of your speeches, and just being a millennial, I thought it was very interesting that you guys cited millennials as being a really core source in the creative development of both of your industries and in art industry in general. But I was actually having a conversation with some friends out in the hallway, and we were talking about the difference between, it's going back to the generation speech, about the difference between what the mindset of millennials is compared to older generations. And talking to my friends and peers and stuff in our classes, I mean, I'm very fortunate to go to a university where we have a lot of people, kind of looking to the future, seeing how they can benefit things. But especially in high school, they were using Snapchat, or playing Flappy Bird and all this stuff. It was more of like a, just something that you do, something that, it's something, a mindless activity kind of thing. And I'm very interested to kind of, think about what you guys think millennials would react to knowing how much they're actually benefiting, both, Washington, D.C., but also kind of benefiting each other's lives through MTV or something like that. I've had a horrible day or something like that, and I watch a YouTube video that just brightens my day up, made by somebody else, but it's, just something that, they thought up. It's not anything that they're like going out and changing the world with this video that they're making, or coming into this restaurant and tweeting that they really like this area or whatever, promoting it. So I'm really interested about what you guys think, how it would change if millennials actually knew this, and kind of changing that perception of, switching from, this is a mindless activity to how can you change the world, and kind of giving us some purpose, where it kind of seems like it's, not as apparent as it was in previous generations, if that makes sense.
We talked about, we had lunch together and we talked about, generations and millennials and how they're growing, what happens with, the next generation. I have 2 kids, we all, have kids, and where that's going, and, with so much technology and so many screens and virtual reality and augmented reality, like what's going to happen? They're so entertained and they're so stimulated, so when do they actually stop for a minute and actually think? And we don't know where things are going. But I also, when I look at our target group and when I look at MTV, sometimes the tools change, but being a teen is just being a teen, Like you go through the same issues now than you did, 20 years ago. You're evolving, you're changing, you're experimenting, you don't know who you are, you have insecurities, you go to school and you want to belong. So all those things don't change, the tools change. So at a certain point, when you're a teen, you might do things that might be not as maybe smart, but eventually you grow out of them. That just has to do with maturity. So I don't think that there's that much effect in how, all the entertainment that they have. Is just a question of, they're teens and they just have more tools, and those tools output content and you can actually see that, whereas before you just didn't see it. So I think it's this, being a teen now as it was before, it's not that different.
I'm not sure I fully followed your question, but I'm going to try and answer what I think I thought you said, or you asked. I'm going to answer it with an example of what I see at work. So I interview people who are looking for employment sometimes. And it used to be, 10 years ago, people, say a couple living in Ohio, out of work, the husband would look at the paper, find where his line of work is hiring, and literally go there in order to get the work, in order to interview for that work, in order to get that job so that he can feed his family. Now, I interview some millennials, and the conversation goes something like this. Hi, my name is John, and I've looked at your firm, and I think it's really cool, but I've got a few questions for you. Okay? So I really wanted to know what you think Gensler can do for me, and why I should be serious, like why should I seriously consider working here? Right? So I'm thinking to myself, what just happened here? This person has moved from Ohio, now it's a millennial, moved from Ohio to DC without it thinking about it. We're going to where we want to be first, then I want to figure the rest out. But I love it because the millennial is saying to me, I've come here because I'm trying to tell you something I believe in. I believe in sustainability, and I believe in human rights, and I believe in this, that, and the other. Why? You need to tell me why I should associate my brand with yours, right? Because that's all I'm interested in. I want to take my brand and raise it up. And if that means adding you to the brand, great. If not, let's just talk about it so I can go to the next guy. That's what an interview is like these days. And I love that because whereas before, it's pushing us in our delivery, right? This is what millennials are bringing to the conversation. It's pushing us to make stronger stances, to be more, I guess I don't know what the word I'm thinking of it is exactly, but it's really telling us we need to be out there purposeful, being more purposeful about what we do. And I love that about it. So yes, kids are what kids were to some extent, but there's definitely some value that I see being added, tremendous value that this generation is adding to my business and to our industry. And I don't think there's any question about that in my mind. I think that is definitely a differentiator and something that, as a millennial, I think should be a source of pride.
Can I add one thing? Or?
Yeah, real quick, go for it.
So, I'll let you talk. No, I mean, look, with what I showed you, I mean, there's a reality, especially in the corporate world, like I'm 42 years old, which, you think I'm fairly young. But in a company like mine, you get old very quickly. So you need those kids, and they do bring a lot of experience. So suddenly you're looking at them as, they have the answers. And it's weird when that happens. Suddenly, I was looking up and, so the corporate ladder and like, okay, here are everybody that's, sort of influencing me and, okay, you got nothing else to offer me. And now I got to look at you guys and like, what do you guys have to offer me? And, most of this stuff, it's done by kids that just spend all day on, online and on, I can't think of the platform, but anyway, so they're online all the time and, they come up with the stuff. And it's crazy, but for brands like ours, like we need that talent.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's like so, what used to be important is shifting, right? Yeah. So,
but please join me in thanking them one more time. We're going to move on. Thank you guys. You guys are fantastic.